Looking for HD TV on the go? With Dish Outdoors, you can get easy, no-contract, pay-as-you-go satellite TV wherever the road takes you. With a portable satellite antenna that sets up in minutes, you can enjoy reliable HD entertainment even in remote locations. No long-term commitments, just flexible, hassle-free TV for your RV or outdoor adventures. Get $100 off your setup with code SM100. Visit dishoutdoors.com to claim your offer today.
And warmer from the low, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in a few minutes by one of our good friends, Nate Hornung. He does a great job over at Your Betting News, and I know that he's taking a look at college basketball, getting set for the upcoming season. He's joined me once before on the podcast. He, much like myself, a former non-D1 guy, and I think that that's a great place to be chatting today. How to gauge some of these guys that maybe don't have the most amount of film on them. I'm talking about high school recruits. I'm talking about junior college transfers. How does he try to be able to decipher that, the impact that they're going to be able to have moving forward? And we're going to talk about a few mid-major conferences as well. We're going to be diving in a little bit on the Atlantic 10. We're going to be diving in on the Mountain West. Just see where it takes us. I know that we're going to be talking about the Kansas schools as well. So we've got a lot of fun coming up. It's going to be a nice two-part conversation with Nate, and you know him a little bit better as Shaggy Bets as well. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM. Amy does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions, everything is powered by EdgeBoost. EdgeBoost is making sure that bettors are able to have access to their funds anywhere and at any time. Over at EdgeBoost, they make sure that you get cashback rewards when you utilize EdgeBoost. And when you go to EdgeBoost.bet, put in that promo code of Greg, Greg. I can see a dollar for dollar match on your first deposit up to $25. Now let's talk with Mr. Nate. You know him better as Shaggy Bets. Does such great work over at the Up Your Unit show with our good friend Kobe Marcio. He joins me a lot on the baseball betting podcast. For those that listen to that, for Nate, I know that he is very hard at work taking a look at so many different things, and you're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at Shaggy_Bets. And Nate, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Happy to be here, Greg. Thanks for having me on.
Nate, I've been discussing this on the podcast the last few days, and I want to get your thoughts because I think that it's one of the hardest things to do for us gauging college basketball. How do you go about looking at these guys that have never played Division I college basketball before? And I'm not even talking about the D2 guys because we're both non-Division I guys. I feel like we actually have a good gauge of what to expect out of some of those guys coming up, but I'm talking about the high school seniors that become college freshmen, and I'm talking about these guys coming up from the junior college ranks because there's not a lot of tape on these guys, and it feels like it's a big giant guessing game at times.
Yeah, you definitely have to go reaching to find film or really information on these guys sometimes. So when it comes to the freshmen, you know, high school basketball has really evolved over the years. You're seeing a lot more college prep type schedules and even Division I type schedules for some of these schools. So I like to target those guys that are going the non-traditional high school route, playing at places kind of like IMG Academy or Montverde Academy, Overtime Elite even, guys that kind of have been playing this D1, almost a pro schedule rather than, you know, going the traditional route, sitting in classes 8 hours a day.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's so interesting to take a look at because nowadays you've got guys that specialize in basketball. You saw some of those traditional, like, oh, a guy plays 4 sports. He's really good at all of them. He had a choice between bowling and college basketball and things like that, which I always think that that's fun. But I do think that it is interesting to be able to slice through as well. And is it more or less taking a look at some of these physical attributes of them or taking a look at more of the raw numbers? Because I do think that when it comes to the lower levels, sometimes the numbers truly do lie, and just the level of competition that is being played is just so drastically different that it makes that very, very hard to be able to put a lot of stock into.
Oh, 100% agree. And that's a great segue because one of the guys I'm really excited to watch this year is coming up from the junior college level. It's Abdul Bashir going to the Auburn Tigers.
I've talked about him a few times. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, from Casper College. I mean, this guy's a big wing. He's a 3-level scorer. He doesn't waste any points, averaging 27 points, 4 boards, and 4 assists last year. But you said it. It's at this junior college level, and I don't want to knock that level of basketball, but going to the D1 level, and let alone the SEC for that matter, that's a big jump. You see a lot of the junior college guys go to these more mid-major schools, but he's making the leap immediately to high major SEC basketball teams. So he could very easily be one of the Tigers' top scorers this season. But again, it's tough because how do you evaluate those numbers at the junior college level? You really can't tell.
And how much do you trust in a school like Auburn that has had success bringing in guys from the junior college level? Look no further than Chad Baker-Mazara, who, I mean, he's still playing college basketball. He's about 500 years old, but I do think that there are certain programs that they just get it right. UAB is another team with the XL Lendeborg being really, really good for them. And then there are some teams that they take swings at the junior college level and, well, it doesn't pan out.
Right, absolutely. It's a guessing game. And especially with the transfer portal now, there's just a lot of work for these college coaches to do in the offseason. So it is tough to gauge. The coaches kind of have to throw a dart, hope it sticks, and see if it works out in November.
Yep, no question about it. As we do have joining me here, Nate Hornung. You better know him as Shaggy Betts, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And when it comes to, shall we say, more of the mid-majors, I think that they're more of the intriguing teams because we have noticed a little bit of quantum shift in this day and age in college basketball. All of the power conference teams, they want to be able to bring in these guys that were averaging 15 to 20 points per game at a lower level, bring them in and have them be instant production guys. Meanwhile, it does feel like more of these mid-major teams are going more of the, shall we say, beaten path with the junior college route and their high school freshmen. And I think that that's a little bit of a changeover because while the top 100, top 150 freshmen, they're still going to all these power conference schools. I do feel like these guys that were maybe guys that would be sitting the bench for a few years at the power conference level in the past, a guy like maybe number 167, 168 in the freshman class, now I feel like they're going down to these mid-major ranks to be able to play right away and perhaps have one or two big years and then go to the power conference level where they get a bag of money.
Oh yeah, absolutely. With the transfer portal nowadays, you're allowed to move schools as long as you want. You can play basketball for forever, apparently, like Chad Baker-Mazara is doing. But it is interesting to see. You can't imagine these mid-majors have the same deep pockets of NIL boosters like the Power Four conferences do have. So it is maybe a little more appealing to these lower level guys of, hey, I'm going to go get my minutes at a lower level college, get my film, prove myself to these D1 coaches. And then, when I turn to a junior, senior, become an upperclassman, go get that bag at a real Power Four conference level. So I like to see that. I'm rooting for the guys at all levels. That's for sure.
Yep, I am as well, and it is nice to see these younger guys getting a little bit more experience. And how much do you think that could be a game changer for some of these mid-majors? Because while these mid-majors are not going to be getting like a top 25 guy in the freshman class or anything like that, I do feel like the level of freshmen that are going to be going to these mid-major schools is going to be a little bit higher because nowadays with there being so many more transfers at the power conference level, you only have a limited amount of roster spots. I do think that is going to lead to some of these mid-major teams perhaps being able to strike gold on some of these freshmen and have these guys come in and be instant impact guys that were maybe, shall we say, a little bit under recruited.
Absolutely. No, 100%. It gets crowded up there at the top, when you've got classes like Duke signing, 4 guys in the top 25 of this 2025.
The Boozer brothers.
It's insane. They're going to be very fun to watch, but it does make it harder for the lower level guys to squeeze in there and find that roster spot. So I know if I were playing basketball and being recruited, I would want to go to a school where I was going to be on the court and actually playing minutes. And so maybe those guys are making that decision. Okay, I don't need to play at Kentucky. I don't need to play at UConn these first couple of years. Let's go get my tick and then see if I can get up there next year.
Yep, and I think that is something that has very much changed in this landscape of college basketball, and that does have me bullish on like a lot of these Atlantic 10 teams because I just take a look at these top 200, top 250 recruiting rankings, and while you're not seeing VCU land like the top 25 guys or anything like that, they're very much crowding these like top 150, the top 200, top 225 sort of range. Fordham has even brought in a few guys, and I do think that with the Atlantic 10, it's a very interesting conference I feel like is really making the most out of the fact that they don't have any football, so they're able to allocate all their resources to basketball, and I think that there's a lot of Atlantic 10 teams that are going to provide a lot of bang for better's buck when it comes to the non-conference portion of the season. I think that league in general is just poised for a big year in general.
The 8-10 is always interesting. I love watching the basketball from that conference. You always have, kind of the 2 teams on top of that, but then you have the mix of those teams in the 3 to 6 range that they could be feisty and, make a run during that 8-10 conference tournament, maybe even surprise someone and steal a bid. But it is going to be interesting to see these mid-major teams. I'm very high on the Mountain West. I love just watching Mountain West basketball in general. I know they're shifting. We might not have Mountain West basketball here in a couple of years, but that is definitely one conference I love specifically watching some late night hoops.
And we might not have WAC basketball before we have Mountain West basketball as well, because the Mountain West actually gains Grand Canyon to be able to help them out a little bit. So that's interesting to say the least. And I want to dive in a little bit more with Nate about this on the flip side. Talk a little bit about the Mountain West. Talk a little bit about what we're getting out of Grand Canyon with them making the move on over. And we'll talk about the Kansas schools, which ones he feels bullish/bearish on. And that'll come up next. Right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beast and Family Podcast.
This summer, buckle up for a wild ride with The Pickup, where the plan goes sideways and the laughs hit hard. Streaming August 6th on Prime Video. Eddie Murphy and Pete Davidson star as Russell and Travis, two armored truck drivers who think they're on a basic cash run until everything goes off the rails. They get ambushed by a crew of ruthless criminals led by Mastermind Zoe, played by the one and only Keke Palmer. Now, Russell and Travis have to survive the chaos, clash with each other, and somehow make it through one very bad day that just keeps getting worse. Directed by Tim Story, The Pickup is packed with action, comedy, and a cast that delivers every single time. Think car chases, big laughs, and even bigger personalities. If you love a high-stakes mess with wild energy, this is the movie you don't want to miss. Watch The Pickup, only on Prime Video August 6th.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family Podcast. Great to be rejoined by Nate Hornung. You know him better as Shaggy Bets on the old Twitter/X. That's at Shaggy_Bets with regards to that Twitter/X handle. And we left off talking about the Mountain West. How do you take a look at the Mountain West for the upcoming season? Because as we know, lots of coaching changes out there with UNLV, and the fact that they do bring in a guy that I like at Josh Pastner. Colorado State, Ali Faroukmanesh is coming on over there. I thought that Eric Olin was a good hire over at New Mexico, and I don't think that we're going to quite get like the 3-4 bids in the NCAA tournament like we've seen from the Mountain West in past years, but I feel like there's a lot of teams that are probably going to be in like that, I would say 50 to 75 range when it's all said and done with regards to rankings.
Absolutely. I'm rooting for the Mountain West, and you said it. We've been blessed with 5 teams in the tournament recently. I'm not sure that's going to be the case this upcoming season, but you kind of said it with Ali Faroukmanesh taking over at Colorado State. I'm really excited for what he's going to do for that program out in Fort Collins. They're feisty every single year. Very, very good on the defensive side of the basketball as well, playing slow offensively, really controlling tempo of the basketball game. So I'm really looking forward to see how he does out there.
Yeah, but I think that he might actually be the biggest unknown out of all the guys that were hired out there in the Mountain West, because we know what Josh Pastner has been able to do in the past, and if I'm calling it what it is, I think that Memphis fans treated him a little bit harshly because, it's not like Penny Hardaway is not any better than what Josh Pastner was doing out there. And then obviously Eric Olin going on over from UC San Diego, took a team from the Division II level to the Division I level, got them to the NCAA tournament this year, and I feel like both of those programs are poised for solid years. I don't know if they're going to be able to do enough to be able to make the NCAA tournament, but I'm feeling bullish about both of those schools, and especially with UNLV, the way that they've had the transfer portal this offseason.
Absolutely. Like we've alluded to, this is going to be a very, very competitive conference. I'm just excited to watch it all. Seeing how these new coaches do pan out with all these new pieces. Like you said, coaches, players, it's a whole new look in this Mountain West Conference. So it's going to be a very exciting season.
And we do have to address this as well. How do you think Grand Canyon might be able to fare in this conference? Because as we know for Grand Canyon, when they've had their step-up games, when they've had to play against the likes of a San Diego State, St. Mary's, Arizona State, insert your favorite school here, they've been able to do a relatively solid job of being able to take that step up. But now this is sort of the norm for them. Now they're going to have to play against much better competition, whereas in the WAC, sometimes you can coast against Tarleton State, Southern Utah, what have you. They don't have that anymore, and I think that that's going to be really interesting to see how they fare, but I certainly do think that it also ups the, shall we say, overall quality of this conference as well.
Oh, absolutely. Speaking of the Lopes specifically, you said it. They are playing much better teams now. The Mountain West, a big step up from the WAC, and they've also got to replace their leading scorer for the past 2 seasons. Kansas City native Tyon Grant Foster going to Gonzaga, pairing up with Mark Few after leading the Lopes and scoring these next 2 seasons. So that's a lot to replace coming into an even tougher conference. I like this Grand Canyon team. I think they're up for the challenge.
Yep, with Grand Canyon, I think that it's going to be such an interesting season for them. And Tyon Grant Foster, for as much as we want to talk about him, he was actually a really bad three-point shooter last year as well. So Grand Canyon's three-point shooting might be able to go up this season, as well as our grade always goes up when we've got this man aboard, as we've got Nate Horning. He does great work over at Your Betting News, and additionally, you know him as Shaggy Bets. He's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and I'm very excited to see Nana Wusu Anane over there at Grand Canyon as well. And then just in terms of teams that you're feeling bullish on, obviously the Mountain West is a conference that you're very much gauging, and I remember the last time you joined me, you love these guys that come up from the D2 ranks up to the D1 level, so I know that you were talking about Iowa, but are there a few other teams that you're just taking a look at and you just think that they might be in for a good year and maybe they're being a little bit undervalued coming into this upcoming season?
This team maybe not necessarily undervalued, but I personally just have to talk about him as a Kansas native, as a Jayhawk lover. Bill Self bringing in the number 2 overall recruit Darren Peterson.
Great
18
name.
points and a co-MVP in the McDonald's All-American game. KU hasn't had this highly touted freshman since Grady Dick a few years ago. And Peterson's going to have an immediate impact. This roster went through a complete overhaul, and I think Peterson is probably going to be the guy for the Kansas Jayhawks. I think Bill Self is going to look for him to be the number 1 scorer on the team. I'm very excited to see how he does this year, and I hope the Jayhawks can get back to the tournament and find ourselves a win.
Yep, with Kansas, I think that it's really interesting what they did in the transfer portal because they didn't necessarily bring in like the star-studded guys or anything like that. They brought in a lot of guys that were solid at the mid-major ranks, like a Melvin Council is going to be coming in. As we know, they swung and missed with A.J. Soar. How do you take a look at what they did in the transfer portal this offseason as compared to the past? Because they brought in, for lack of a better term, less sizzle, but they probably brought in a little bit more stake and guys that certainly are going to be willing to fit in with any role and guys that are probably not going to be coming in with much of an ego. Sorry, looking at you, Hunter Dickinson.
No, you're not wrong there. 2 guys I'm very excited for are both seniors, both experienced guys. Jaden Dawson coming over from Loyola Chicago, and then Trey White as well, coming from USC, or excuse me, coming from Illinois rather.
Was at USC too, though.
Yeah, he's been all over. USC, Louisville, coming straight from the Illini now, though. I think those 2 guys as well pair up great with Peterson in that backcourt. Dawson is just a great on-ball defender, so I think he brings some ferociousness to this defense that, the Jayhawks defense has kind of been soft over the past couple of years, in my mind at least. But I think Dawson brings a step up to that, and then Trey White, another scoring option. Maybe I have too much faith in this Kansas Jayhawks team. I like to keep my expectations low going into the season, but I've got some faith in them this year.
Yep, and with Kansas, they are obviously going to be in a Big 12 where they fell behind the SEC a little bit this past year. But how do you take a look at the overall landscape of this conference? Because I think it's very clear that Houston is that top team coming into the season. They were able to make the national title game last year. Going to be losing a few pieces, but when you bring back a guy like a Milo Suzan, that's going to be able to help you out quite a bit. But I think that's just a really interesting landscape in general where teams like Arizona are going to be rock solid. And I think that it's once again going to be a year for the Big 12 where you see a lot of good teams with a few question marks with like Baylor and Kansas State going to be able to decide whether or not this team can overtake the SEC once again, or if they're still going to be that number 2 conference, much like a season ago.
I like them to get back there. I obviously a Big 12 homer here, like to see them succeed as a conference as a whole. But you mentioned it. Houston is head and shoulders on top of this conference. You've got 3 top 22 recruits. Big guy Chris Sinak coming in from Link Academy, originally from New Orleans, as well as the number 14 overall shooting guard Isaiah Harwell is going to be some immediate scoring to replace an LJ Cryer. And speaking of LJ Cryer, you've got Kingston Flemings, the number 6 overall point guard, coming in to handle the ball. Kelvin Sampson been really busy in the offseason. If those 3 guys paired with Milo Zuzan and Emmanuel Sharp returning, I think Houston could be very, very good. I know we talk a lot about the Houston defense being the strength of that team, but if those 3 guys produce, I think the Houston offense could actually make some noise this season and keep them on top of the Big 12. But overall, going to be a very, very tough conference, top to bottom.
And I know that you just love talking about this team because you admitted that you are a big fan of Kansas. How do you take a look at Kansas State for this upcoming season? Because I said this on the podcast quite a bit. It just felt like it might have been a one-year wonder sort of run for Jerome Tang. His last 2 years, it's been a bit underwhelming. I did like the fact that they did some nice moves here in the offseason. You're bringing PJ Haggerty, who I think is going to be solid, but it just feels like with Kansas State, perhaps they caught lightning in a bottle with Maurice Sowell and company that 1 year, and perhaps that just, for lack of a better term, overrated Jerome Tang a little bit, and it's sort of a need to see it to believe it sort of year out of Kansas State for me.
I would agree with that. I think bringing in the PJ Haggerty definitely, that's just a huge bump to your offense. One of the most highly touted recruits and one of the best guys in the transfer portal. So that immediately ups your offense. But, he's still got to be the guy, which Coleman Hawkins was supposed to come in and be that guy for the Wildcats last season. I know we talked about it last time I was on here, but you just paid Coleman Hawkins a bunch of money and he didn't really show up. And now you're doing the same thing with PJ Haggerty. So the expectations are very, very high surrounding not only Haggerty specifically, but the whole Wildcats roster. I don't have much faith in them. I do kind of think it was a shot in the dark that they did make that run a couple of years ago. This season, it could be a little rough for the Wildcats if Haggerty doesn't pan out to be that scorer we know he can be.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I think that for Kansas State, they might be lost in the abyss a little bit in a Big 12 that I think is going to be very good this season. What's even better is all the work that you're doing, Nate. I know you're very hard at work over at Your Betting News. I know that you and Kobe Marcio do absolutely tremendous work over there. And I know that you do just so many different podcasts, so many different articles, what have you. So love to get people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yep, absolutely. You can find me on all social platforms at Shaggy_bets. You can find all my written work at bettingnews.com. And then, like you said, I host a podcast twice weekly with our good friend Colby Marcio. What a guy, man. What a guy.
Yes.
Me and Colby, we host Up Your Units twice weekly, Wednesday evenings and Friday mornings over on the Betting News Network. So follow along for all your sports betting needs.
Absolutely. It's a lot of good, clean family fun when those two men are doing shows together. And it's always a lot of fun whenever Nate is aboard on this podcast. So a big thanks to our good friend Shaggy Betts, a.k.a. Nate, for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter /X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters they mean does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm with you guys all 365 days this year, and on leap years, I'm with you guys 366 days of the year. Every single day you get a fresh podcast, so I will be back with you guys once again tomorrow. Thank you so much.